I love the idea of the Playdate, an impossibly tiny Game Boy style device. It's incredibly pretty. The design is immaculate. The crank is a bit of a gimmick. I could do without that. The screen is not great, but it's unique enough that under the right light, games do look pretty cool on here. And there is a pretty decently large collection of cheap or free games that are usually very unique. I feel like there's a pretty cool community around this thing. Personally, I got it when it launched, had a fun little romp with it, and then shelved it for like 2 years. But I'm constantly reminded of its existence, and I'm always tempted to dust it off, if nothing else, just for the sheer charm that it radiates. With all of the devices out right now, I just need a good reason to dust off the Playdate. I think a video is a good enough reason. The Playdate gives you a pretty good reason to check in every once in a while, just to dabble in all of the unique games that have been added to its library, most of which cost absolutely nothing. I've also been very interested in emulation on here, which has been pretty terrible in my experience. This thing has all of the makings for a great Game Boy emulator, if you like playing your games at half speed. But there are now 4 Game Boy emulators available, so maybe there have been some improvements to those? 2 years later, I still have some hope for this thing. The idea is still good. It's incredibly functional in some ways and frustrating in others. But that's what makes it interesting. That's what draws me to it. And first things first, it's been a while since I've charged this thing. Luckily, this thing takes USB-C, so with a smart enough charger, you should be just fine. Which makes this a great time to talk about this video's sponsor, Ugreen, and their Nexo Pro 65-watt 3-port ultra slim fast charger, which they call the Cookie.
Oh, they lied to me.
65 watts is way overkill for the Playdate. But this has 2 USB-C ports and a USB-A port. Can you focus quicker? God. So you can charge your Playdate, your phone, and an entire computer all at the same time.
Oh, wow.
My wife and I can't agree on what to order for dinner, but we can both agree that that's a lot of ports. You can charge a MacBook Pro 13-inch M2 from 0 to 51% in just 30 minutes, according to their estimates. And it's ultra slim, so it can fit in virtually any bag. Need more power? Try their Nexo 4-port 100-watt charger, which supports even higher wattage for fast charging. And if that's not enough, they even got a 160-watt charger. It can keep going up. They'll never stop. You can check out Ugreen at the links in the description below and all of the chargers I just talked about. Thank you. After the Playdate woke up from its long slumber, the date was wrong by like months, and the Wi-Fi was set to my old Wi-Fi, so I had to fix all of that. Like every modern device, you gotta update it. And I gotta get all the games that I've been missing. And this took a really, really long time. It had to download all of the game updates that I didn't have yet, which took maybe 45 minutes. Then I had to manually update the system, which only took a couple minutes. Then I got to download the 6 new games that I missed from the Playdate catalog. And that took another 2 hours. And you can't really leave the download page because that will pause the downloads. This all also drained the battery like crazy. I think leaving it plugged in actually makes the downloads go light years faster, so maybe do that. There is a lot to download on here because the Playdate gives you a ton of free games, which is unique for a console to do. But the way that the Playdate handles the release of these games is very bizarre. Every week you own this thing, they'll just give you a new game, which is awesome. But the timer starts when you first turn on the device. So you'll start with 1 game, and then every week they'll give you another one. So maybe you really want to play Casual Birder? Well, you might have to wait 3 weeks while everyone else has already played it like a whole year ago. If you don't want to wait that long, you can just set the clock on this thing way in the future, or you could just download the game off of itch.io and sideload it yourself. This is kind of an interesting way to keep things fresh, but I kind of just wish they would release things weekly to everybody, sort of like how Nintendo and PlayStation handle their online services. Every so often, everyone gets a new game that they can all talk about together. The Playdate supports up to 802.11n Wi-Fi, which is probably why all of these downloads took so long. The Playdate also has Bluetooth, but it's not functional. Playdate claims they'll add support in the future, but it's been 2 years. So I'm not sure how much longer they're gonna take. Immediately, I'm reminded that the screen is still very bad. I get the idea they were going for. There is a charm to a Game Boy-like screen where you have zero backlight, and the resolution is pretty solid, but the viewing angles on here are just so bad. You basically need either broad daylight or a light pointed directly at your screen, and you can't move your screen. The back of the screen is supposedly super reflective, as they say. It does catch light relatively easily, but it does need a decent amount for a clear viewing experience. It's not the same as, say, e-ink. In fact, it's much worse. It would not have taken them much at all to put a front or backlight in here. I don't think that would have taken much away from the charm, but I guess not having a backlight means the battery lasts an insanely long time when idle or sleeping. So there's that. This is so rough because as I move the device, I can't see what I'm doing because the viewing angles are so bad. I'm surprised and a little disappointed by how little the landscape has changed in terms of games that you can download for this thing. I went to itch.io, went to the Playdate tag, and sorted by top rated, and most of the top rated stuff are games that I played already. The number one top rated is still Island, which is awesome, don't get me wrong. I talked about it in my original review 2 years ago. If you liked Animal Well reminded me a lot of this game, Island. It's all I kept thinking about while playing Animal Well, so it had a lasting impact on me. Island is only about an hour long, but it's a solid experience. If you don't have a Playdate and you want something like Animal Well, you can download Island on itch.io and use the Playdate Simulator app on your computer to emulate it. In fact, you can do that with any Playdate game. Island is just kind of the best that the Playdate has to offer. I even went to the r/Playdate console subreddit and sorted by top post of all time, just so I can see what everyone's playing. And the top post is a game called Shadow Gadget, which is also a game that I downloaded.
Shadow Gadget!
I got it way after I reviewed the Playdate. In fact, I remember dusting off my Playdate just for this game. It's intriguing because there's two versions, Shadow Gadget and Shining Gadget. It's sort of like a Pokemon or Yokai Watch style monster collector. You use the accelerometer and crank to sort of suck up ghosts. I remember having a really difficult time figuring out how the crank controls worked. But I think all the charm here is in the visuals. It's extremely pretty, and it has some pretty cool monster designs.
Wait for a ghost to appear. Walk, crank, speak to attract ghosts. Hello? Hello? Give me ghost. Oh, it's ghost, please. Oh, give me that ghost. Oh, give me that ghost. Oh, yeah, baby.
The second highest rated game on itch.io is Sketch Share Solve, a puzzle game that I've never tried before. This is the second best rated game? The third highest rated game on itch is Bloom, an extremely pretty narrative game that I have played before. It is cool, and I think people will really like it, but it's not really my thing. And that's sort of the theme with the Playdate. There are a ton of games that are either cheap or just completely free, and they're all weird in a good way. And that's a lot of what I love about this thing. Now, almost all of the games on here are small games developed by just one guy as like a side project. But an effect of that is that most of these games are narrative driven or puzzle games or just extremely experimental designs. There's a ton of variety in terms of what these games achieve within those genres, but there's not a ton of variety outside of these genres. Even still, it allows developers to get pretty wild. While these experiences might be small, it makes it easy to jump between all of the different games. It's not a golden corral, it's an omakase. The charm here is that there's a lot of little experiences that you can jump between really easily, that are all wildly different. What I'm getting at here is that it might not be a great console if it's your only console. It's not going to replace your Switch or your Steam Deck, or hell, even your Game Boy. But it is fun to jump in every once in a while just to see what's new, even if once in a while turns into once a year. I do like how installing games yourself is impossibly easy to do. You go to play.date/account/sideload and just drop whatever zip you want to install right there. Without even plugging in your Playdate, as long as it's connected to Wi-Fi, it'll just show up in your games list as long as you refresh it. Every time you get a new game, you have to unwrap it like a present, which is exactly how it was on the 3DS. So if you haven't touched your Playdate in a while, you have a lot to unwrap. It's charming at first, and then very quickly becomes really annoying. Star Sled is kind of cool. This is one of the games that I missed when I first played the Playdate. You control your ship with the crank doing loops around stars. It's simple, but I played it for a bit longer than I intended to. Similar to Island is a game called Woodland. It's a game about collecting wood. It's the same sort of top-down adventure situation as Island. My game crashed about 20 minutes into the game, and it made me want to stop playing. I was really hoping that this would be a bastion for emulation. It's the perfect form factor for my dream emulation machine. Unfortunately, it's not. I mentioned before that there are 4 Game Boy emulators for this. As far as I could find, there's Playboy, GameKid, Peanut GB, and Play GB. Most of these are just ports of the Game Boy emulator Peanut GB. I've used Playboy and GameKid in the past. They're a bit slow and low frame rate, so they're not very promising. They haven't been updated in quite some time, but I updated them on my end anyway, just in case I missed something. And I haven't missed much. To add the ROMs, you have to boot each individual emulator app at least once, so that they can each create a folder for themselves. Then boot the Playdate into storage mode, plug it into your computer, and drag over the files into the apps folder. So I had to do this 4 different times for the 4 different apps. PlayGB runs okay, actually. Not a full 60 frames per second, which is totally fine for Game Boy gameplay. It's probably about 40. Just no sound at all. GameKid is noticeably slower and also has no sound. It has a few scaling options though, which is pretty cool. Peanut GB has sound, but oh no. That's not it. Is definitely not right. And Playboy was also bad. I don't know why. This played a little better than this when I tried it a while ago. It looks like the winner here is PlayGB, even with no music. The clock speed is just way higher. It's playable, but it's still not perfect at all. It might feel fine when you're using it, but it's still slower than it should be. You can see it falls behind an original Game Boy. Also, there might be some weird glitches, like in Metroid 2, Samus just didn't show up for a second. Also, there is no start button in any of these emulators, so you might have noticed that they all use the crank for start and select. I think I feel the same way about the Playdate as I always have. It is really fun every once in a while to pop in and see what's new. It's usually a pretty good time, and it feels like a totally unique experience that you can't get anywhere else. But realistically, you could probably just go to itch.io and download games for your PC every once in a while if you want something weird and quirky. But there is a difference here. The difference is that all of the games are 1-bit, and they're usually heavily stylized. And it's the charm of playing these unique games on a device that's so unique. If this device didn't look like this, if it wasn't this thin and this small, I definitely wouldn't like it as much. I'll continue to revisit it every once in a while. Every time I do, I discover at least one game that's magical. I wish it was a bit more powerful. I wish it had just a little more potential for emulation. GBA games would go so hard on here. If you want this thing, you'll have to want the weird games that you'll get. So I'd recommend checking out the catalog on their website and the Playdate tag on itch.io. You can even sample those games with the Playdate simulator on desktop. For a while, the Playdate was hard to get, but looking at it now, it seems to be available to ship in just 2 to 3 business days. Possibly because they just found a truck full of them outside of a restaurant in Vegas. That is not a joke. They actually lost a truck full of launch edition Playdates when it first came out, and they recently, just a few weeks ago, found them outside of a random restaurant. So, it's available if you want it. It's still $200. I think that's a pretty reasonable price for what it is, but it's certainly not for everybody. I do hope for a bit more here. Unfortunately, it is up to the community, and I hope the ecosystem doesn't eventually become a wasteland. Maybe there's potential for a Playdate 2? Anyway, what do you guys think about the Playdate? Have you forgotten about it until I made this video? Has it been in the back of your mind this whole time? Is there anything that I should be doing on here that would make me like it a little more? Leave it in the comments below, add me on Twitter, any and all of this other social media garbage. Again, I do really like it. I just feel like there's not much to do here. You might have seen that I put this in a little slip cover. That slip cover is just something I got on Amazon. I'll link it below. I just wanted like the most minimal case possible. Also, thank you, Green, for sponsoring this video. If you need a charger for any reason, check them out at the links in the description. Some of the footage here was streamed over on twitch.tv/wolfden. I'd like to make those videos live so people in the chat can help me out if there's something I don't know. Of course, the most important thing that you can do here to support this channel is just subscribe and share this video with a friend who is maybe thinking about getting one of these, or a friend who has one of these and might need a reason to dust it off. Thank you very much. Have yourself a good week. There's this guy who does like tech reviews. I saw him review a bunch of chargers, and he just has this dog that just stares at him through the whole video. It sits and stares at him the whole video. You wouldn't do that. Oh, maybe you will.